This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
Following is a paid program. The content is provided by the advertiser. WPSL, its staff, management, and ownership are not responsible for the content. Investment involves risk. Prior to making any investment, an investor should meet suitability requirements. Past results are not necessarily indicative of future performance. Neither the opinions expressed nor the information provided constitutes a recommendation to purchase or provide investment advice. The material presented is not a substitute for obtaining professional advice from a qualified person or firm. Securities offered through Centaurus Financial, member FINRA and SIPC. And now, the host of the Team Martek Hour, Joe Martek.
Joe Martek, really? Remember him? Yeah, listen, he does radio shows. Can you believe that?
Who?
Starting back in 2004, Greg Fasula, attorney, Dan Warren, independent insurance agent, Joe Martek said, hey, let's get together and do radio shows. And Greg said, why? And I says, well, Greg, each one of us has a different area of expertise that we can help people with. They can call us in on the shows, and we can talk about stuff. And he said, do we have to?
So if they wanted to call in, what number would they use, Joe?
340-1590. Today's a good day to call in and ask for legal questions.
Uno de Mayo.
Oh, Cinco, almost de Mayo. Yeah.
Almost.
Uno de Mayo.
What, oh.
4 more days is Cinco de Mayo.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Dos de Mayo is
I
tomorrow.
love tequila. To kill you.
Tequila tomorrow.
Agave. It's good stuff.
Anyway, the concept, we started doing these shows. We had no clue how long we were going to last. We figured, I guess we guessed maybe a month or so, and then here it is 15 years later.
Overnight success.
Oh, yeah.
We're still waiting.
We're still waiting for the success. But the concept has worked phenomenally well. And just about 5 or 7 years ago, and I don't remember how long, Vic, we added you to the show.
Can't remember either.
But I want you to get closer to your microphone because
Can't remember either.
Yeah,
we're close.
But it's been a good while, especially I think it was 7 or 8 or 9, somewhere in there, because when the Great Recession hit, we started getting phone calls about the problems with real estate.
Yes.
And let's face it, real estate was a monster subject for everybody. Back, what you went through with short sales, which was a brand new subject that nobody ever heard of before. In fact, there wasn't one, I don't think, until then, was there?
I didn't know of any before then.
No.
But it was illegal.
I've heard of foreclosures,
it was a legal
but not
thing.
short.
They just didn't do it, basically.
Well, I don't think we ever got to the point where we were so upside down
that a bank was willing to
accept. That a bank was
accept.
willing to say, okay, we'll work with you and modify your loan to short it. And a short sale, Joe, means not short in time.
Right.
For them to process it, but short in money. So what they were trying to do is make your loan a little shorter that you could afford to live there.
Definitely not short in time.
No, not short in time at all.
Well, what happened is, let's say you owed, if you owed 200, but the house was only worth 100 because the market collapsed, they allowed you to sell it for 100 and walk away without having any liability.
Or do a modification.
Or a modification.
And if you did a modification, you had to qualify for that modification just like you would a loan.
Yeah.
But if you could still afford some type of a payment,
right,
and they were willing to short it at that time, they were putting it at the back end of the loan, the amount of money.
I know.
but if you paid on time for a full year, some of the lenders were cutting off some of the funds. So let's say in the back end you had another 100,000, they'd say, okay, the first year if you pay on time, we'll cut off 25,000 of that. Then you only owe 75,000. So
did they cut more off every year?
Yes,
if
they
they
did.
stayed? Well,
if you were paying on time and doing if you missed one time or one payment or was late on it, the deal was completely void.
But did that affect your credit, though?
Well, it did affect your credit, but what did they do with the credit? Where before with bankruptcies, you had to wait so long before. Now they're only doing it for 3 years, not 7 or 10 years.
Well, even Mike said, I think sometimes, and Mike Paulus is the newest member also with Victoria, mortgage broker, and he said sometimes right now, even with a short sale, that he could get people financed within 1 year now. I mean, it's
correct. That's a short sale. We're talking about foreclosures.
Yeah,
was a 3 years.
Foreclosure's a different story.
Right. So it makes a big difference.
7
and sometimes 10 years.
Yeah,
and we do. I just heard from somebody that had a lender that would not give a mortgage because he wanted them to go out 10 years, not just the 3 or 7 years. Yeah. So there are some that are still sticking to it.
If you're a lender, wouldn't that be smarter to push it out
No.
For 10 years?
No, let me tell you why. Because everybody had that same problem at the time. It wasn't like it's not like we were trying to default on our loans and not paying it. We just got into a situation where so many people lost their jobs. So when they looked at that
That's
situation, it wasn't like you and me where there's millions of people that are paying on time and you and I aren't paying on time, then we're going to be penalized for that. Why should we be penalized when the whole nation had a problem?
340-1590, 340-1590. We got Greg Fasula, attorney here. Ms. Victoria Lloyd, Remax of Stewart, has been talking. Dan Warren, independent insurance agent, and Joe Martek, financial advisor. Interesting as we start to go through this stuff, Vic. One of the things that was a big subject back in the late 70s, early 70s, were D-backs, deed in lieu of foreclosure, where they just would not foreclose on the property. You just give them the deed, and you walk away from the house, and you were done. I haven't heard about that going on for a long time.
And they did. They did that in some of the cases, but they wanted to make sure. Because I said, if you give up your deed, are you going to still be penalized?
Yeah.
And the other thing that they did correct, you used to get a 1099 for the difference in money of the short sale, and they stopped that for a long period of time where you didn't have to pay for that.
What that meant was this. Let's say that you got $200,000 loan, but you deeded it back for $100,000. They would send you a 1099 that you earned $100,000, which causes
Correct.
a major tax problem. And a lot of people didn't know that at the time. And remember, that was a big scandal going on.
Well, I always told people that. I said we have to find out the terms of the condition.
You did, but you know how many people weren't told?
I
Yeah,
know, because
yeah.
nobody-
It's how many
nobody
people
did
didn't
that.
tell.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean,
I still do that with everything.
Well, I had a lady that called in not too long ago on the other show that we do, which I don't talk about, WCNO 89.9 FM at 4 o'clock.
That's an extra $50.
That's what I figured. Anyway, she called in because all of a sudden what you were saying about money was tacked onto the back end of her mortgage. And I don't know if you weren't there, but I just said, hey, listen, what you weren't told or you forgot, that's what they did. But the bottom line was they allowed you some time to get back on your feet and bring a lower payment, and now they didn't forgive the money. They just tacked it onto the back end. Now, what you're saying is if she had made her payments religiously for a long period of time, they might have forgiven a whole amount, but she may not have.
That's true. And they would tell you that in the beginning of the loan.
Right.
With the modification. They
Right.
would have said to you, this is what our terms and conditions are. They actually send it to you in writing, so you have all that in writing. You actually sign for it. And if you abide by those rules and regulations, then they were doing that. And I know of some people that did. Now, remember the time we talked about where some people got houses completely free because they couldn't find the original
Original notes.
That's
yeah.
right.
Original
And I
notes.
do know of a couple of people that did get their homes free and clear.
Well, I know people that have gone a long, long time because basically you have to have an original note. If you don't have the original signed note, you can't foreclose. But you can go to court and sue the people, and the people have to testify that they did sign. But this is now like a 5-year process. I mean, it's not an easy thing. But, hey, listen, most of these days, you know what happens in life, and I'm going back to 1976. And back when I was in real estate, and you remember we used to do projects for banks, and we had this big high-rise on the Gulf of Mexico, and I was talking to an officer with whatever bank it was, and here's this great big high-rise, no condos were sold. And I said to him, I says, boy, it'll never happen again. You banks make this mistake. And he said, don't count on it. He says, what happens is everybody that made these bad loans has either been, I love this word, promoted or fired. I mean, there was no choice. You didn't get to keep your job. You got a better job or you got fired. He said, what happens when the banks have too much money? They need to get it out on the street. They need to make loans. Otherwise, they're not making any money because they have obligations with that money. He said, so it becomes too much or too little. He said, so it will happen again. And since then, we've seen it happen at least twice, maybe 3 times.
Absolutely.
You know, and it's...
So have you guys seen the new TV ads for these new savings and loans?
Well, it's 2% for a money market.
No, I understand that, but savings and loans.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, wait a minute.
I didn't even know
thought-
there one existed anymore.
I know, but they're coming back like
resurrecting.
big time. And it's like, really?
Well, there's got to be a reason underlying that we don't know. that I don't really care about much because that was the main source of lending money.
That was the
way
problem.
back.
Yeah.
Well, hey, we were back in the day when there were 110 and 120% loans, where you needed $1 million to buy the property and they loaned you $1.1 million or $1.2 million. So you walked away up front with a profit.
But doesn't that seem inherently foolish?
Well, guess what happened? That was when the S&O crisis occurred.
Gee, come on.
Gee, funny that should happen.
You wonder why you have problems.
Yeah, and I remember we back when we used to take over projects. I took over this one for a developer, and he had a 110% loan. Well, he ran out of money in like 60 days because he spent it all.
I mean, I remember when we had a local auto dealer who would sell a Yugo on your credit card for $90 down or $100 down, and he ended up with a whole back lot full of them, and you wonder why. Well, when you do semi-foolish things, expect
it's gonna
bad
come.
things.
Yugos, boy, you remember those?
Oh, I remember that. They didn't go, but
3-4, yeah, you go, they don't.
Do you remember the Maverick Grabbers?
oh yeah,
You do. Oh, God, when I first heard that, I said, "What are you talking about?"
What about
Maverick
the Gremlin?
A
The
Maverick.
The
Gremlin
Maverick Grabbers.
Ford had a Maverick.
Yeah, and
The
they made it
Maverick.
bigger.
A
The
Grabber.
Maverick, but the
It was
It
Maverick
was a
Grabber.
sporty Maverick.
Yeah.
Sporty
Okay.
Maverick.
It's like a Gremlin X. Such a thing shouldn't exist.
Yeah. 340-1590, 340-1590. Talk to me, Vic. I mean, I had a buddy of mine that wanted me to buy the duplexes over on Hideaway, quote, as is, because it would never have gotten financed because an appraiser would have come out and said it needs $150,000 worth of new dock, et cetera, and it just wasn't going to fly. So
Right.
what happens when a person buys as is?
Well, we have a thing, and this happened. It's called an as-is contract. We used to have contracts before that you would have a percentage put in the contract for repair work to be done to the home.
Mm-hmm.
So one would be under a termite. So if there was termite or wood rot damage, and there'd be a percentage for that or a dollar figure, whichever you agreed upon, or you would do that for repairs. Well, once we had all the foreclosures and the short sales, they were selling because these houses sat for a long time and they had no electricity. They sold them as is. But don't get scared by that word as is. And the reason I want to say that to you, because an as-is contract says that you have time to do due diligence. So you have time up to how many days you make it. Normally it's from whatever day, up to 15 days.
So the day you contract to the day you close, or there's somewhere in between, or you can do inspections.
That's right. So we're writing a contract today, you and me, Joe, and it says within 7 days, 10 days, or 15 days, you're going to have inspections. And in that time, you have due diligence. You can cancel for any reason, not just because you might have met the neighbors or something happened that
Makes
you
no
found.
difference.
Makes no. So you have those 15 days, let's say, to do whatever you have to do. So don't get scared. Everybody gets scared when they see as is. But let me tell you about an as is. This is interesting, and a lot of people don't realize this. We have our home inspection today. In the home inspection, you found a few things that you will accept, but you found a few things that you really want that seller to pay for. And he's saying, but you're buying this house as is. So at that point, either that seller can agree to do that work, and you both agree on that, and we do an addendum, or both of you say, I'm going to cancel the contract,
Right.
and you get your deposit back.
Right.
But this is the other thing with that. Let's say you did that home inspection and everything was in working order at the time, but now we're heading to closing and we're doing the walkthrough.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I like to do walkthroughs right before we close. I
Right.
don't want to do them a day before. I don't want to do
Couple
them
hours.
a week before. I want to do it right before closing. Everything must be in the same working order as the time of that inspection. So if that refrigerator now is not working
Or gone.
or gone, that's what'll happen. You can say, I want that refrigerator. And if they don't, they have to fix that refrigerator or give you a credit or something at the time.
So that's in the contract.
That is in your contract. That's why I don't want you to be afraid of as is.
Well, that's if, let me just warn you just a little bit. That's if you are handling, or a credible realtor is handling the contract to make sure that documentation is in there, right?
Well, it is in your it's in your standard FAR bar
Standard
contract,
form.
but you still have to follow through and make sure you have the proper addendums at the time
Right.
that you want the repair work done or not done. Now, the other things that happen with this, and please remember this, you must maintain that home, because so many people say, oh, you're buying it as is, so I'm already on a contract. You have to cut the grass. You have to maintain that home in the
Until the
same
day you close, right.
condition as the time that person saw the home. Now, let me tell you the other thing you have to do, and I just ran into this problem recently. You've got to have that home ready for the day of closing. So many people say, well, when do I need to move out? Well, you need to move out before the closing. Everybody asks me that. I can't begin to tell you, Joe, how many people ask me that. But I always, in the beginning, explain it, but then you explain it again. Remember, they say you have to do it like 3 times?
At least, yeah.
So what happens is that day of closing, you better have that house cleaned and ready for people to move into. Because if not, that can create a problem and you might not close, or have to make sure you have a cleaning person ready to clean that house and have it ready.
340-1590, 340-1590, and we got our No, it's not our faithful listener. It's our faithful mortgage man, Mike Paulus, is on the phone. Hey, Mike.
I feel like I haven't been faithful because I haven't been on the show for a while.
You haven't been faithful. You're pretending you're working Oh, wait a minute.
What?
Last time I saw you had a sunburn, so I know you weren't working too much.
No, that was my blood pressure.
Oh, yeah, right.
That was from his high blood pressure.
Right.
Because in this business, that's a problem.
Hey, listen, if listen, the whole concept of what we do individually and as a group is to try to help people avoid the mistakes that a lot of people make. And still, it goes on. It's like Vic is saying right now, telling people they need to get out of the house before closing and have it closing ready, and they don't. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and that was a great topic that Victoria was talking about, because most of the contracts that we see are these as-is contracts.
Right.
And like she said, a lot of people are fearful of them, but in reality, they're the better way to go, because if they find a problem with the property, then it gives them the opportunity not just to pull out of the contract, but to renegotiate the contract.
Sure.
But a lot of times when things pop up during the inspection period, there could be major issues like termite structural issues and whatnot. But we can by that time we can turn our loan around and do what's called a renovation loan, where you can get an estimate for the repair, and let's say it's $10,000 for the structural repair.
Right.
We can sometimes build that into the mortgage and appraise that property as if the construction was already done, give it the value, the after construction value, and finance it into the loan.
And I want to talk to you about that, Mike, because I have a listing that needs a little repair, and people are shying away from it. So I was meaning to call you. I want to put something together that I can put inside this home.
Yeah,
so
these
we
renovation
can do
loans
this.
are the hottest things right now, because I guess because of HGTV, people are watching these shows and finding what they can really do. And, it's great, because if you have a house that needs a little tender loving care, or some, just some touch-ups, or maybe it needs a full-blown renovation. When a lot of the agents that I deal with, what they do is they present these houses in open houses, and they have like a whole showroom, like a new construction showroom, where you can say, okay, well, you can pick from all these tiles, or this flooring, or these kitchen cabinets, just like when you go into a new showroom for a house, and it's a great way to market a property.
Sure.
So when you do the construction loans, Mike, like that, can they go to any contractor that they want to, or do they have to pick certain contractors?
You can go to any licensed contractor. However, I find that it is really helpful if you go to a contractor that has used these types of programs before, because we don't advance a lot of funds up front, and a lot of contractors, as you know, want to get as much of their money up front as
They
possible.
want to work on your money.
We don't
Of course.
Yeah, we don't operate that way.
Right.
We want to see some progress on the project before we advance funds. Not to say we won't advance any funds, but normally we don't advance the funds that the contractors like to get advanced.
They work on draws, don't they, Mike?
Yeah, and it depends on the complexity of the project.
Say it's a
If you're gonna do-
$20,000 job, they might do 5 at a time or something.
Yeah,
like that.
I mean, if it's a simple, okay, we're going to renovate the kitchen, put all new kitchen cabinets and appliances in, that's pretty cut and dry. It's maybe one, maybe two draws on that.
Right.
But if you're going to use the renovation loan to put a whole addition on or a second floor,
Right.
well, that's more of a construction loan.
Right.
And it'll be set up that way, where it might be 4 or 5 draws.
Gotcha.
But
Hey,
the
Mike.
beauty of these renovation loans is you give us the estimate, and we will send those estimates to the appraiser. The appraiser gives us a value as if those renovations were already done. They're giving you the credit for it up front, and we can finance it into the loan that way.
Okay, perfect.
All right.
Sounds good. We got another caller, Mike.
Mike,
Okay.
listen, you coming later on today? Because I know it's a long ways from your office.
Well, that show's a little closer to home, so yeah.
Yeah,
I'll be there.
like 2 blocks.
Yeah,
Anyway,
he said-
all right, Miguel. Good
Bye.
talking to you.
Talk to you
Great
later.
show.
Bye-bye.
340-1590, 340-1590. And we have another caller on the line, I think. Our producer's husband here is he's not very good at operating the radio here, but do we have another caller? You think we do? Yeah. Can you hear me, caller? You're on the radio.
Hello.
Is it Eartha?
Yeah, this is Eartha. Do you remember me?
You know how many people are named Eartha? That's pretty hard to come by. So you're I think you own that one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so we met at the Common Stewart a few years ago.
Right.
Anyway, I was so impressed with some of the work that you did, and now I see that you have a broadcast, and I'm just happy to be on it.
Well, wonderful.
So, thank you. So I have a question. I was issued some stock options from my company.
Okay.
And recently, I guess the company's evaluation was said to be about $4 billion.
Go ahead.
And so the stocks that I have also had like a 1-in-10 split. So I was able to sort of exercise a few of the stocks.
Right.
But again, they're options, right? And so I want to know, like, what do I do with these options?
Well, when you exercise an option, you're going to be given the stock. If you have the option, you have a period of time that you can exercise it. Did you look at the option? Does it have a date on it? Like they're good until a certain date?
Yes. Yes, they're good until a certain date, and I've already exercised it. And I think the company has said that they're going through sort of a second funding round.
Okay.
I'm learning all this as I
know,
go.
right?
Right? So I'm just wondering, if the company goes through the second funding round, right, it's great to have like 20,000 options, right, or how many ever
Right,
stock
you've got,
options,
right,
but
right.
what do you do with them, right?
Well,
So
first of
how
all,
do you get rid of them?
once you exercise, you can sell them because they're yours. I mean, you now own stock in the company.
Like regular stock.
It's like regular stock. It's money. And what happens is normally when a company issues you these options, you're getting a better deal than anybody else can get, so you have a good possibility for a profit. So here's the easy thing to do. Do you know right now you can look up the symbol for your company online and find out what the shares are selling for?
Currently.
Right now. Do you know how to do that?
I don't. Now, here's the other tricky part. They're not actually on the stock exchange.
Well, that makes it much more difficult.
It does.
Because now you have
So-
privately issued stock. The only ones
Right.
that are going to buy them are the company. They'll buy them back. So now you got to take and this is even easier, even though it's more aggravation. You need to call back to the company and say, "Hey, I've got these options. I was issued 20,000, whatever the number is. What are they worth for you to buy them back from me?" And just bam, just like that.
Okay.
And I mean, it's just that
That's
simple.
it.
When it's not a publicly traded company, the only way you're
Yeah.
going to there's 2 ways you can sell them. You can get Dan Warren to buy them because he's not too bright.
That's right.
That's it. Now, if you get Greg Fasula to buy them, he'd put you off for 6 months. But Joe Martek isn't even going to talk to you about buying them.
20 million shares of Turner Broadcasting.
Turner Broadcasting, right? iHeartRadio.
no.
Let's buy those so we can lose all our
I
money.
bought a bunch of Eastern years ago.
Yeah, right. Anyway, honestly, just call up your company, anybody, and just say, "Hey, I've got stock options that I want to redeem. What are they worth?" Now,
Thank you so
that doesn't
much.
mean that you want to do it once they tell you what they're worth, but the odds are pretty good. To me, if it's a privately held company. Now, let's just wrinkle this up a little bit.
Well, let me ask you this, Joe. Let's suppose it is a privately held company.
Right.
and I'm like Eartha. I call them and I go, hey, what are they worth? And I'd like to sell them to you. And they go, they're worth $10, but we don't want to buy them. What do you do?
Nothing.
You're just stuck with them?
You call
Do
Greg
they-
Fasula,
do they
and Greg
have to
says,
buy
I'll
'em?
buy them, but not for 6
Do
months.
they
or-
have to buy them?
No. The key thing is this. There are terms with each one of these. The easy way to go is call the company. They're going to tell you the straight skinny, whoever's handling that thing, and you'll know exactly. Now, there's another option, though, that might work, and that is, what if the company plans on going public this year or next year?
Correct.
Those things could be worth a lot of money. Now, you know your company, and one of the questions is, hey, are you planning on going public? And if they'll say, no, we have no intention whatsoever, we're a family-held company, we're never going to go public, well, then you're back to the number one thing, can you buy my options back from me?
If it's a $6 billion company, it may very well go public.
It may very well. Like right now, look at the big companies. Lyft just went, Uber's going to go, Pinterest just went, and this is a big time for companies going public because the economy is so good. These companies are making a killing by going public. So your company might be doing that. So here's what you do. You've got my office phone number, do you or not?
I do not, but I can get that.
Let me write it down. I'll give it to you right now. It's funny how I would know such a
He
thing.
has an unlisted number.
Of course. You ready?
Yes.
678
Okay.
7725.
125.
If you run into any aggravation when you're doing this, just call me up and I'll get involved and help you. This is, hey, listen, you might just become a very, very, very wealthy woman, and you're looking much better to me already.
I hope that's the plan.
Hey, hey, I'm on your side right there. All right, Eartha. Hey, good talking to you.
much. Thank you, Joe. Take care.
Bye.
Why would you not exercise, or why wouldn't you take an option? Why would
Well,
you not?
No, you get the option, which then gives you the opportunity to get stock.
So
And
why wouldn't you?
Normally you would, unless
You
the
got to have
value.
the money.
But wait a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, but
But what
do
if
you
the
get,
company is going down rather than up? They give you a predetermined
that's a
price.
good
But don't
question.
you always have an option to buy stock?
Not necessarily. When you are a company employee, oftentimes it's an incentive to give you an option at a given price,
And it's
Okay,
usually
so-
lower than the
okay.
price.
lower than
That's
the
why
market.
it's an incentive to work there. For
Okay,
the stock
that
option.
makes sense.
So let's just say
Like
you work for
Publix.
Publix, which is a closed
Right,
company,
right.
and you go to work and they say in 5 years we'll give you options that you can exercise in 10 years, and here's the predetermined price, and then 10 years goes by and the shares company will buy them back for $100 and you got them for 50. Well, no kidding. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So it's not an easy answer. You need to do a little bit of homework.
But doesn't the company have to buy those back?
I'm not sure.
I don't know.
My biggest thing is this: you have to be very careful how they're worded.
Yeah,
See,
sounds like it.
An option, if you think about the word option, an option does not give you 100% very often. It might give you the opportunity, but not the guarantee. It really depends on how it's worded. Now, the object of an option, too, is usually it's one-sided, meaning she's the one that has the option to buy them, but there may not be a predetermined price either. I mean, look at, as things are worded, have you ever noticed, Greg, in life, things don't always go according to plan?
That's why you have an attorney.
That's why you have an attorney. And then the
The other
attorney says,
Greg.
I'll talk to you in 6 months.
Attorneys and doctors,
right.
right?
Attorneys
Hey,
and doctors.
I've seen where they say you have the option to buy X% or X number of shares based on your position in the company.
Right.
The higher up you are, the more options you
Yeah,
get.
yeah.
And it's usually the cheapest that the stock has been in a certain period of time.
Yep.
So if the stock has gone down to $20 during that period of time, you'll give 20. If the current price is 30, you just made a $10 profit right off the bat.
Amen.
That's usually how they work.
Okay.
But all
that
you
makes
have
sense.
all you have to do is find out the details. I mean, every all the skinny stuff is in the details, and if you don't know what you're doing, and which Eartha's got that thing, she just needs to call up and find out what the story is.
And most options are what I call golden handcuffs. They try to give you an incentive to keep working there
course.
because you can buy them at a better value, and the longer you're there, the more you're worth. I mean, talking about Publix, I know a lot of people who retired from Publix, very wealthy people.
Yeah.
Yeah, very well. You know, it's the golden handcuffs. I haven't used that word for years,
But it works.
But that was the whole concept of vesting.
Yes.
You know, if you work here for 10 years, you're fully vested. But if you want to leave in 5 years, we ain't going to give you nothing.
A lot of my buddies at ESPN made a killing when Disney took them over.
Yeah.
Because the Disney people walked in and said, we'll give you X amount of Disney stock. And, it's amazing.
All she has to do is find out. I mean, listen, there's a chance her company might go public, and that's a win-win. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing is, if her options have, like Dan said, guarantee the lowest price, and the prices. But if it's not publicly traded, see.
Well, when she said it was worth $6 billion, Publix came to mind right away for me as a company that's that big, and it's not a publicly traded company.
No, and
very few companies are.
And it could be that's who she's talking about.
Very likely.
340-1590, 340-1590.
Another mic on the line.
We got another mic. Is this this might be our steady mic. Mike.
Yes, it is. Good
it's
morning.
It's our steady mic.
I hope you don't mind that.
Hey, listen, we love having you call. You kidding me? We got the only liberal we got here besides Greg is you.
Well, over the top, flamboyant, extreme, that's really the name of the game today. Picture with me, if you will, for a moment. The tour bus pulls into view, a short but nicely decorated totem pole on top. Out steps Elizabeth Warren in moccasins, deerskin leggings, and a full feathered headdress. The theme of her campaign is unity. Her campaign slogan, because you have to have one, bury the hatchet. Can you imagine, because she has a cozy relationship with the media, they would follow her like an adored puppy, and she would just get the most publicity of any of them, making the rest of her competitors look like namby-pamby milquetoast.
I think you ought to become her campaign manager, Mike.
She could do it. She's well-spoken and bright. I want Mr. Trump to win, but I want this to be an intriguing race, and I think
I want it to be an entertaining race. That's what I want.
Exactly.
You describe an entertaining race.
Exactly.
Hey, listen, I think it's going to be Biden and Bernie on the ticket.
Well, the trouble with Mr. Biden, I'm afraid the first debate could leave him twitching in the throes of a coronary thrombosis. He doesn't look that strong. He'd never be able to hang with Mr. Trump.
Yeah, that's a bit of a problem. But, hey, he doesn't have to do debates.
Now, Bernie and Joe remind me of the two old guys on the Muppet Show up in the balcony.
Yes.
That's who they remind me of.
Great point. Is Victoria still available?
Yes, she is.
Hi, Mike. It's
Hi.
Victoria. How are you?
One day I will be looking for that home of my dreams when my ship comes in, probably in a year or so. And I would like my home to have a fireplace. Is that possible in South Florida? I've always wanted that. My condo is really a tight little fit for me, and someday I'm going to want to step out into something nicer.
Absolutely. We can
Lots
find
of
you a
fire.
fireplace.
There's lots of houses that have fireplaces.
Yeah.
I wondered.
And I'm going to tell you a funny story. When I first sold my mom and dad their home here in Florida, she was sitting by the fireplace, and she says, "But Victoria, what am I going to do with the fire?" I said, and we're from Maryland originally. I said, "Mom, sometimes you use it." Well, not the first year, but the second year when her blood thinned down and my dad's, they were using it, and they really, really enjoyed it. Not that you use it a lot, but it's enough
I had
that
a
you enjoy
fireplace
it.
in my house. I had to turn the air conditioning on to use it.
Well, I like that too.
Speaking of air conditioning, Ms. Lloyd, mine has been out for 6 months, and I'm such a cheap person, I'm just doing without it. I live with a dehumidifier and a cooling assembly in here and stay pretty comfortable. Is it possible to sell without the central air working?
Well, it depends on the value. We can always talk about that, and then we have to disclose it.
Okay.
But a lot of times people feel because you haven't had air conditioning in there that there could be some mold problems because of it in Florida. So
Inspections.
Right. Well,
It
that's
comes
why I
inspections.
use the
They will.
dehumidifier.
But your
more.
question was, can you sell it? Absolutely, but sometimes it draws a little red flag because of it.
Well,
Yes.
you know, when you're going to show that place, Vic, you said, hey, I've got a special bargain deal because, you
Yeah.
know, obviously your price is going to be lower than a person who has got everything working perfect.
Yes.
And that's the whole concept.
Well, mine was a bank, take. And it was abandoned, basically, condo as is. It was in deplorable shape. I couldn't even live in it for the first year. I just worked and had things done and made it real nice. But it took a year to do that. So I bought it as is, and that's why I wondered if I could sell it that way.
Sure.
But
Absolutely, yeah. That's what we were just talking about. Absolutely, and we just need to disclose it, and they'll ask how long it's been where you haven't had air conditioning, and then like Joe said, they will do their inspections, and it's all based on value. So sometimes when you look at it, for what they're going to, sometimes let's say this, the value might be a lot lower when they put in an offer than it would be to get an air conditioning.
Sure.
Sometimes if you get that air conditioning, Mike, it just brings the value up more.
it makes it sell easier.
More
Absolutely.
sellable,
Sure.
yes. Because in their minds, like Joe says, we did big developments, but there'll be days where we'd say, we're going to include, if you purchase today, a washer and a dryer.
Right.
And vertical blinds on all your windows. We never gave a value because to some people that was worth thousands of dollars, and to them they were willing to do that for that day.
And there's another thing, Mike, and it's never made sense to me, but of course women don't make sense to me either, so forget about that part. But when people look at something, they don't oftentimes see what it could be. They see what it is. They just don't have an imagination. So very often, if you're going to sell something and you want to get the fair price, sometimes it pays to spend the money up front to make it look really well.
Absolutely.
Because the people that don't have an imagination might be half of your buyers. So
And what is the square footage of your condominium at this time?
Yes, Savannah condominiums just south of Fort Pierce, and I paid $30,000, and it's very safe and nice. I've been really happy. I've been here 20 years. I paid outright and bought it.
You got a 2-bedroom?
A large 1-bedroom, a huge living room.
Yeah, and it's what, about 1,000 square feet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you're going for an air conditioning, and I'm just going to base it on some of the values I've seen out there, and I've got a great air conditioning person, it runs about 30, a little under $4,000, like $3,800 or so.
What I've been told. See, I just haven't been able to do that.
Yes. And it can go up depending on the brand you want and how many sears it is. But
Of course.
And Mike, what you might want to also think about is talk to a couple of air conditioning contractors. A lot of times they take out perfectly good units for people who want to upgrade. You might be able to find a whole system for $1,500, $2,000 to satisfy the need and have something in workable order.
But there is something you need to know about that too. You must get a building permit.
Absolutely.
You must have that. And the other thing is your inside unit has to be identical to your outside unit.
Same maker.
Yes.
It has to be the same maker.
What happens is, like she's saying, you probably already know this, Mike, but the two different units, one might be fine, the other one might be bad. Right. You might be able to keep
the
half
handler,
the system.
the compressor, depending on what you use.
Right.
But you can't do that anymore.
Well, before I moved my poor mother out of Gator Trace, her villa, her air went out, and the company we got put her in a really small minimal system, but it did the job, and it was like half the price. So you're right about that. Yeah. And brand new.
There you go.
And they have ductless air conditioning now also.
Yes, that they put in the wall, but it depends on the condominium what wall you
have
that it could vent out. You can't do that there, and that's great in some of the houses where they put them in the garage.
Yes. Right. No, it has to be central.
Hey, Mike, thank you so much for
Mike.
calling in.
Have a great day.
Okay, thank you all.
Have a wonderful.
And Joe has your ship. It's called the SS Minnow.
There you go.
It's a 3-hour tour.
I'll keep that in mind.
Boy, that word tour brings up a lot of memories, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
340-1590, 340-1590. It's an interesting journey. Let me talk about 5 minutes about a trust, because I had a lady that called this week. She listened to the other radio show, and she was talking on this thing I was talking about. Be careful about putting your kids on deeds, because it could void your homestead by putting a child on your deed, which means if you get sued, your homestead could be taken away from you. And if you put your children on deeds that are not homesteaded, all you're doing regardless is exposing yourself to 2 or 3 more people that have a potential for lawsuit. So you could lose all kinds of different things.
So if I put my child, let's say, on that, and my child had an automobile accident that was their fault, and got sued and got a big judgment, now my property's at risk.
There you go. So what I've suggested strongly to this lady, and Greg, we don't always say that a trust is the right thing to do, but in her case, she said a lot of individual lots plus rental properties,
right.
And And I
yeah,
said,
when you have all those rental properties, those are all potentially probatable. So
one, they're subject to probate, and two, the lawsuit provision when you add 2 or 3 other people. But on the other hand, if you put it in a trust with the kids as beneficiaries, there's no probate.
Right.
So the object of a trust is to avoid probate, number one. There's not really much. People used to think you could put things in a trust and avoid lawsuit potential, but that's pretty much been circumvented.
Yeah, many years ago that might have been the case, but
Not much
now
anymore.
it's because of statutes, it's very much like a will.
Yeah.
And it's
Unless
not
you-
a way to
unless
avoid.
you did an irrevocable.
Well, yeah, that's
Which
true.
she may or may not be interested in some of these properties being in an irrevocable. You know the difference, Greg, right? Revocable means it's like being married and a woman won't let you go and it's going to cost you a fortune to get a divorce.
You're good at that, Joe. You should know.
340-1590, 340-1590. Dan, what's new other than the fact that you're not dead?
Well, here's what's really happening. I've been telling people for a long time that the rates on the homeowners are due to maybe start tracking up, but we've recently had legislation in Tallahassee passed, which is due to go into effect July 1st, which is going to amend some of these assignment of benefit contracts, which have been really dogging the industry for quite some time. I mean, it's gone up from like 300 and some claims a year about a decade ago to over 40,000.
Wow.
And the majority of that is by about a handful of lawyers. So it's like a little honey hole they found to extract money from the industry. It's costing you and I as insurance clients a lot more money. That's due to change, and everybody I've talked to indicates that's going to suppress some of these rate increases, and we might see some stability in the market. So that's good news.
That's a good thing.
That's a good
Well,
thing.
it's kind of nice to
That's
hear
really
good
good
news,
to
yeah.
hear that. Yes.
340-1590, 340-1590. And Bulldog, my man, you're still alive.
Yeah. I just say that way too.
Hey, I understand. Well, you sound good. How do you feel? Okay, never mind that one.
He's a little tongue-tied.
Oh.
That's not fair.
Well, that was good,
fair,
Dan.
Not fair.
Wait, was that Dan?
That was Dan.
I'm canceling all my insurance. That was you, man. That was rude.
I know.
Hey, but you got to give him credit. That was impressive.
quick.
You
It was
thought-
quick.
It was good, but it was rude, but it was good.
it was appropriate too. You got to admit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry I was tongue-tied. Back up my tongue. Hey, Vic.
Yes.
Just a quick closing still on same date?
Yeah. I don't know if the 9th.
Yeah. Is that
Yeah,
good?
right now, we're just waiting for a clear to close. There's just a couple things there that we're waiting for a clear to close, which I talked to TJ yesterday about.
All right. Good. Thanks.
You're
for doing
welcome.
that.
Yeah. So yeah,
Great job.
we're 99.9%. We always have that, that little percent there until we get that clear to close.
Well, I also wanted to ask. Well, it would be a Paulus question, but Vic, you would know this too. I always get all this mail saying, refinance. What is there a benefit to doing that, or
Sure, to the lender, they make money.
Yeah. It just depends, it depends on what your interest rate is and what your new interest rate's going to be and if you're going to incur any cost. So these are the things you're going to look at to see if it benefits you, but all the other things benefit the lender.
And sometimes when they say no cost, they just roll them into the loan.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
there's no upfront cost,
Gotta
but
be
they
careful.
roll it into the loan.
Well, I know that when they did mine and they said there was no cost, they didn't charge me anything at all
Yeah.
because I had paid my loan
Yeah,
down
that's
to
because you
nothing.
were
That's 'cause
Italian.
you
You
know
had
what
a
you're
gun
doing.
and a
Yeah.
club. Key is this, like anything, it depends on your interest rate. If you've got a 4% interest rate, you're probably not going to do much better. But, when lenders come along now and say, well, hey, now your appraised value is $50,000 higher, we can get you more cash in your pocket, but they're going to take a fee, obviously, to do the whole thing. Nothing new. You know that.
Right. Yeah. That's why I just basically look at them and go, oh, you're pre-approved for this, that,
Oh, yeah.
the other thing.
Everybody's-
I just rip them and tear them.
Okay, just so you know, that word pre-approved, you still have to qualify for it.
Well, they're pre-approved for an application.
That's all it is.
Exactly
So
what it means.
It's
thank
like-
you.
Have you ever noticed the car dealers and say, credit's no problem, we guarantee to take your application?
Absolutely.
Joe, my credit's pretty damn good, so I'm not worried about it.
Well, I wasn't worried about you either, as long as when you're when you're talking to him, you don't get tongue-tied.
Mine
Right.
was much funnier.
Dan was good, but he set me up. I couldn't let it go without that.
Right, and the cat's on my desk now, so she's got my tongue, so I'm going to say thanks, guys, for everything that you do. I appreciate you. And hello to Alan if he's listening.
No,
He got
Alan
a
has got a flat tire this morning.
We're all imagining him changing it.
So you get a kick out of this. So Victoria says, well, Joe, what are you doing? I said, nothing. Why? Don't you feel sorry for Alan? I said, no. He calls AAA or somebody. They'll come out and do it. Money works, and he's not poor.
Do you believe that,
Vic
Bulldog?
expected me to go over and change his tire.
See, I would go do something like that, but
you
Joe
didn't.
wouldn't.
But you didn't go.
I didn't. You didn't know where he was.
I'm going to call him and ask him. You can still go change.
Well,
I
we're
told him
gonna
to
have
wait
to
until
call-
the show was over.
You had to rescue the. I said, "Is he okay? Does he have water? I mean, is the man safe?"
Oh, my goodness.
Like the neighbor's dog.
This
Is
is
he okay?
after-
Does the
It's
dog have
not
water?
he's like he's in
this
the
is
middle of the Everglades.
No. He lives in Afghanistan. I forgot to tell you.
Oh my gosh.
Right. You send a Humvee after
The
him.
Humvee, right?
Right. All right, guys. You have a great day.
Well, let's
Take
see
care,
you.
Bulldog. Bye.
340-1590, 340-1590. Last 5 minutes or so, talk a little bit about money. And I've been getting a lot of conversation lately about REITs that are paying between 10 and 12% dividend.
You mean a real estate trust?
Real Estate Investment Trust, REIT. And quite honestly, I like these things to be all because the economy is good. And when the economy is good, the word real estate usually is good. Now, a real estate investment trust means these are publicly traded, the ones that I deal with, and the government says they have to pay out 90% of their profits every 3 months. So the company works on the 10%, and the profits, 90% have to go to the owners of the stock. So they're paying, as a rule, 10 to 12% dividend, all the ones that I follow. But every once in a while, because they pay every 3 months, this 2.5% or 3%, the value of the stock is like a roller coaster. Just before you have to own it in order to get paid 3 months worth of interest. Sometimes you only have to own these things for 2 weeks to collect 3% interest. So let's say you had $100,000 into it and you put it in 2 weeks before it paid, before you owned it. That means that $100,000 earned you 3% in 2 weeks. Well, that sounds really wonderful. However, normally the share prices go up considerably just before that date because everybody wants them. And then after the date is too late to get them, the share prices come back down. Well, sometimes the spread from high to low can be anywhere from 10 to 20% in each 3-month period. Last 2 3-month periods, that's what happened. I never guarantee that it'll ever happen again, and it may not ever happen again, but once in a while, these things are magnificent as investments. Secondly, though, if everything goes wrong, you're still making your 10 to 12%. And I've got tons of people that are retired that need income on their money to offset their Social Security. So these things are really, really good.
What do you mean goes wrong with the stock?
Well, here's what happens. They're mortgages. All the ones I deal with are mortgages. And almost all the mortgages are adjustable rate, or they're commercial mortgages on big rental properties or something like that. So the interest rates change with the market. So there's not much volatility to the client. The company has got the same spread. The key thing is this. When the economy is good, these things are exceptionally good. But all of a sudden, when the recession hits, guess what happens to real estate?
Right.
It goes backwards. And guess what happens to mortgages? Sometimes they default.
If I was interested in that, could I say to you, Joe, I only want my REIT to be invested in properties in New York and Chicago and big cities?
Sure.
Or do I get whatever they give me?
The answer is yes and yes. you can go to either direction. Certain companies, in fact, the majority of the ones that I follow on a daily basis are New York-based. The commercial end of it is extremely strong today, as almost all of it. Vic, you know right now, the whole interest rate complex is wonderful. The economy, I was reading a thing this morning about Trump's 289 accomplishments, which very few people give him credit for all of them. But one of the things that happened is our gross domestic product being in this 3 to 4% range has not happened this many quarters. I don't know what the year was, but it's been 30 or 40 years. I think the last time we had a GDP that was even anywhere close was under Clinton. Even under Reagan, it didn't get that good. They were just going through the numbers. So how long is this going to last? Well, there's not a person alive that I know that says 2019 is going to be bad. 2020 is an election year. That should be good. 2021 is now the year that they're looking at that maybe the economies start to go backwards. On the other hand, if Europe and Asia start to come back, which they have not yet, then all of a sudden it helps our economy again.
But we don't have to worry about any of it because the politicians are saying we're only going to last 10 more years anyway.
Which politician?
Pistachio.
Anyway.
But these companies, Joe, can't they take the property? Can't they foreclose?
Well, of course they can. The point I'm trying to say is, but normally when you do something like that, it doesn't mean it's a good thing. It's just not a bad thing. But the bottom line is the profits go down. The profits are made when things are good. Look at the car business doesn't go out of business when things go bad. They just sell less cars. The companies make less money. I mean, it's just that simple. So right now, Dan was big on getting invested in infrastructure. It's only been 6 years for that to come around. Now they're talking finally going to spend some money on infrastructure. $2 trillion, they said. Yeah. Anyway, anybody needs information from any one of us, you call the radio station. They'll give you our numbers, 340-1590, 340-1590. Remember, the group is Greg Fasula, attorney. Greg's biggest bailiwick are wills and trusts and trying to do the right thing for people. And I don't know how many people you've talked out of doing trust, Greg, that didn't need them. They thought they did, that somebody was trying to gouge them for $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000. And boy, didn't I have one the other day. In fact, I had this lady call you. She went to her attorney. She wanted to change beneficiaries. He wanted $3,500.
Wow.
I said, call Greg.
That's crazy.
For what, an amendment?
I'm not even asking the question what he was going to do. He probably was going to restate the whole thing and gouge and justify.
But still.
Changing beneficiaries. So she said she gave him $300. I said, call him up and tell him you want your check back or you want the money back, that you're not going to do it. Yeah. Because that was gouging. We've all seen it.
Yeah, I mean, there's some instances where restating is good, but you can change beneficiaries by a simple amendment.
I know, and that simple amendment, $300 normally, because you're not taking much time. Anyway, until next week, thank you so much for the calls. I'm Bulldog, hold the tongue, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Team Martek Hour. The Team Martek Hour is a paid program. The content was provided by the advertiser. WPSL, its staff, management, and ownership were not responsible for its content. Investment involves risk. Prior to making any investment, an investor should meet suitability requirements. Past results are not necessarily indicative of future performance. Neither the opinions expressed nor the information provided constitutes a recommendation to purchase or provide investment advice. The material presented is not a substitute for obtaining professional advice from a qualified person or firm. Securities offered through Centaurus Financial, member FINRA and SIPC. Tune in again next Wednesday at 11:05 for the Team Martek Hour here on WPSL 1590.